Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. I've got a guitar in on consignment today from the same guy that I had purchased the melody maker that we documented a couple of weeks ago, the Joan Jett signature Blackhearts. That was kind of a cool guitar. It ended up finding a new home all right. So he wanted me to consign this one rather than just selling it because he wanted to get the most money that he possibly could. And basically the story goes is, when we were first talking, he thought this was maybe a 73, but then I think he changed his story to he thinks it's a 69, and he thought it was a Les Paul Standard, but the photos that I had received were a gold top guitar that had P90 pickups in it. So I was trying to work it through with him what this thing was, because, you know, he thought it was stock original P90s, and in order to be that, it would have to be a true 68, maybe an early 69, or a later 70s Deluxe Pro model, or Pro Deluxe as it's correctly said. Other than that, it was ridiculously common for people to swap out the mini humbuckers on a Deluxe to put P90s in it. So, today's episode is, I don't know what's in here. I told him this is going to be worth somewhere between $2,000 to $5,000 because it does have a headstock repair, and I only had a few kind of dimly lit photos to help him ID it past that. So we're just going to have to figure this all out together. So, rectangular case, looking good for him so far because that's late 60s, early 70s. So, let us see what's in here. Missing one latch, but the two main ones are good to go. Still have a handle. Blue Gibson logo on that side. White one on that. Okay. Let's cut the suspense. What is this thing? Okay, definitely 70s, because I saw the pancake body already. But how cool is that? You don't see the Les Paul rectangular case too often. Oh. Okay, all right. Looks like we have a very small volute on this thing. The headstock repair, not looking anywhere near as bad as I thought it was going to. So it's like it only broke on a portion of the guitar because it's a three-piece neck. It's got a small volute. He might have actually been right. This very could well be a 1969. Whoa. It might also be refinished. I'm not sure. We're going to have to blacklight that because this almost looks a little bit more lemony than most gold tops that I'm familiar with. So, this is just going to be a big mystery day where we tear this thing apart to, you know, just see what we can find. Are the P90s actually stock and original? I mean, if it's an early 69, it makes sense. Like, we've got that kind of older looking Gibson logo. Our tuners have definitely been replaced. So that means somebody had probably Grovers on here at one point in time. So far, I'm thinking he's going to be happy with the evaluation of this guitar. So if you are interested in it, feel free to continue watching the rest of this video, but it'll also be available on my website after we do our documentation here. So I think we'll save all the detailed forensics for the workbench, but, you know, first impressions, yeah, this is actually pretty cool. We have a Gibson manual here. These things are worth quite a bit. All filled out, kind of in average shape, they're worth about $100, especially when you have things like writing in it. They're worth more if you can find one that hasn't been filled out, the warranty card, because that's what this was. So this is just like an average like $50 to $100 example. But what's cool here is it looks like the shop owner actually went through this manual with the guy who purchased it originally, because there's so many things underlined, like as the instrument ages, the tone becomes sweet and mellow. And things here like, to prevent slipping, make sure you do this, which is not the way you should string a guitar anymore. Maybe this is just how the guy learned. He would underline the most important stuff. But what I like to see is the original serial number written in here, 891045. Yep, that matches. Now, I mean, anybody could do that with a guitar and say, yeah, that's the original, but we'll just call it a nice little bonus there. It looks like we have some fresh strings that he wants me to put on here. GHS Guitar Boomers. And this might be the original truss rod cover in here, maybe. Full disclosure, there is a very slight smoky scent to this case, but all right. I think we need to throw this onto the workbench to take an individual look at its parts and specs to find out exactly what this thing is. All right, what do I think this is? It's a late 1969 Les Paul Deluxe. Now let me prove it to you why I think that. So first off, just like I thought, these are not the original pickups. I was pretty confident that they wouldn't be, but flipping over to the back side of it, you can see it's labeled neck and has this other sticker with other numbers on it. Now, this is just stuff you learn being in the business, looking at guitars that have been modified. These are Seymour Duncan Antiquity Series pickups. I see humbuckers with these markings put in guitars aftermarket all the time. And sure enough, if you look them up on Sweetwater, $249 a set, exact match here. What's funny is the bridge pickup even has the same cutout on the pickup cover that you can see right here as well. So just because it's replaced P90s does not mean it didn't start life as a P90 gold top, right? Well, that's when you look in here. You see all these extra holes? These are left over from the base plate of a mini humbucker. And those secured to the guitar, I believe using these two. It's been a while since I've seen those. But then the mini humbucker legs rest right here. They're height adjustment springs. So those don't actually get mounted directly to the body the way P90s do. So you can always tell if a Deluxe has had P90s in it because they'll have extra holes drilled in right here. And that's present in both pickup cavities. So that tells me right away it's a Deluxe, so it can't be a 1968. But the way these ones are currently secured, they have 2 screws and then modern day foam in here, because this originally didn't have any foam. And if it did, it'd all be decrepit foam that's falling apart by now. That's definitely modern day stuff. Next thing we're looking at here is a transitional neck tenon. Now, if you don't know what a transitional neck tenon is, there's 2 main tenons for Gibson necks. There's the short neck that you don't see at all within the cavity, and then there's the long neck tenon that normally goes till about right here. Transitional is somewhere in between there that they didn't use for too long, and that's exactly what one of these things looks like. Now, my best guess is this has either been refinished or at least resprayed with a new clear coat, because I don't know, something just seems off. The color, not quite what I normally see, but it might just be because of the overspray over top of it. I mean, it doesn't look like we lost any of our body contours as far as like the belly of the beast goes. I mean, that still looks good. But the condition of this guitar mixed with, you know, how much it was played and stuff, it's just giving me red flags. So I'm going to advertise it as at least resprayed, potentially even completely refinished, because generally you don't see it completely covered over in gold. Like, you'll see some areas that get it, but this even has gold within the pickup channel routes, and that just doesn't seem right to me. But it's a quality finish, don't get me wrong. It feels good, Gibson quality, just not quite Gibson. So next thing I wanted to check out was the bridge itself. I took off the thumb wheels to see if A, is this actually a real ABR1, or is this double thumb wheel actually hiding a stud underneath it? Like, is this actually a post like 1975 Deluxe made in the Nashville factory with a Nashville bridge? No, it's a true ABR1. Now, if you're wondering why do you have 2 thumb wheels, some guys do that to prevent post lean. So over the years, sometimes ABR1 bridges have a tendency to bend this way, which kind of destroys all this, and then you have to repair it. So you can prevent that by adding another thumb wheel that you secure down to the body. As tight as you can go, and it just acts kind of like a stud, but you still get all the ABR1 benefits. So if you ever see double thumb wheels on something, it's because they're trying to prevent future damage from happening. Then we've got a regular stop bar tailpiece on this one. Now, as far as the hardware, 68, 69, sometimes you can find nylon saddles on these, and I noticed these are brass, so that's possible somebody just replaced the nylon ones. But then when I flipped it over to the back, no, this is just a generic cheapy ABR1 ripoff, so not a real ABR1. Looks pretty darn good though. It's a wired version as well. However, the tailpiece, to me anyways, looks about what I would expect in 1969. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that might actually be original to this guitar. Lightweight aluminum. Next up, we've got our beautiful knobs. Just like the knobs I was trying to hunt down for my blue Sparkle Top Deluxe that I eventually found, these are looking great. They've got a good golden aging to them. Now granted, some of them have some chips out of them. I mean, they're not too bad. And I think this one might have been cracked in half at one point in time, or at least right there, and somebody glued it or something. But they appear to be functional here. And they read volume, volume, tone, tone. And then to me, it looks like this plastic has been replaced. The switch tip has been replaced. Essentially, everything on this has been replaced except for maybe the tailpiece and our tuner bodies that we'll see here in a minute. So while I'm getting our ohm readings here, just in case you're not familiar what's so significant about a 68 and 69 Les Paul, that's the first year that they came back after, 1960. They went to the SG body shape before bringing all this stuff back. And there's so many small, minute differences. To learn more about this, I really suggest checking out late60slespauls.com. That's where I learned a lot of my information on these, and now I can just kind of recite it by heart. But I still have to visit it sometimes just to, get the nitty-gritty details. Love that site. Thank you for making it, man. So our bridge pickup here reads 8.33 k ohms, our neck position reads 7.63, and our middle 3.98. Let's see if everything's working here. Yup. Looks good to me. So condition-wise here, there's definitely some nicks and dings put into the top. You can see a small impression there. You've got some finish just missing here, which that's actually kind of a heaven send that that's there. It kind of shows you just how thin this finish is. But you've got some impressions here. I mean, remember, this thing's for sale. It's on consignment. I'm really happy for him that it turned out to be a 69, because this is definitely worth towards the upper end of what I was saying it could be. And if I remember the stories correctly, he's not working anymore. I think he was a veteran, so, he's selling a couple of guitars to keep him afloat here. But looks like our pickguard has left an impression right there, and you've got some other stuff going on. And it's this area right here that makes me think this might just be oversprayed, because you can see these dings, but I'm having a hard time feeling them. Like they're just barely there. It's like they're almost in the finish or something. And of course, we'll check this out under Blacklight to also show you some stuff. The pickguard itself does not look vintage correct to me. This looks like a cheapy part. Nothing too fancy here. But this does have a maple top. We can see that in our bridge pickup cavity. You can see it's got a little bit of a gold paint over top of it, but you can see the color difference between the mahogany body and the maple top. And then the body itself is what we call a pancake construction. So it's still one piece of mahogany as far as like the whole guitar goes, but it's layered. So you got a mahogany layer, a maple layer, and another mahogany layer. So it's still a big chunk of mahogany. It's just stacked up like a birthday cake. That's something you start to see in 1969. And then we can move over here. We actually have a 3-piece mahogany neck. That's another 69 spec that starts to change, because this is when Norland starts to take over. They're trying to figure out what they should do. They're trying to cut costs. Some things actually cost more, but they're just trying to make the most of the wood that they have. And pretty much when they came back in 68, all the specs were still like 50s, so those things are worth a lot on the used market. We're talking like $20,000 plus sometimes. Whereas just 1 year later, few spec changes and they're worth maybe, $9,000 at best. Obviously, example to example, condition to condition. It's hard to generalize, but it gives you an idea. But this still has a rosewood fretboard. You get the acrylic inlays, 22 frets. The frets actually appear to be in pretty darn good shape on this example. I know he said he just had his luthier look over this and make sure everything was good, so I would assume that maybe meant a level recrown, because these are looking very nice to me. Nice dark rosewood fretboard on this one. There's a possibility that this might actually be a refret too. Like these older guitars, the fret nibs are tiny. Sometimes they can crack off or be taken off when somebody's level recrowning. I mean, it's very similar fret wire to what you would find in this era, but it's potential refret. This might confirm my refret theory. Looks like it's closer to a 14-inch fretboard radius than it is a 12, because there's a slight gap with that. So it's gotten a little bit flatter. 24 3/4 inch scale length. Looks like we got a bone nut on this one instead of nylon, and 1.69 inches at the nut width. And by the 12th, 2.04. First fret neck depth, 0.83, and 1.01 by the 12th. It's definitely more of a 60s slim profile, but it's got a real roundedness to it. It is a comfortable neck. And with that full width nut width there, it doesn't feel strange to play. I think this would actually be pretty comfortable. Here's that neck on the 1st fret and the 12th fret. Stays a very nice C-shaped profile. Doesn't get too wide, but has a good thickness to it. All right, now we move on to the face of the headstock. Obviously, this is not original. Some of them would have one that looks like that, but the font is way different. This is just a modern day replacement part to make it look cool. But thankfully, our truss rod, considering the age, is actually in really good shape. Not much threads past the top there. And now the headstock. As I was telling you guys earlier, whenever somebody puts Grovers on a guitar, they have washers. And if somebody takes them off to convert it back to Klusons, you get to see these ugly rings around it. For me, that's a deal breaker on collectible models, but a player's grade one, I could really care less. But I'll show you some other evidences of that on the backside. That's why I took this tuner off. But we can see Les Paul model right here, and then take a closer look at our logo. We've got the dot, it's the open B, it's the open O. That helps us further date this guitar to the time period that I'm looking at here. Besides the logo, you can also look at the size of the headstock. Early 68s, they'll have the smaller one that's more desirable versus what is known as the 70s boat paddle up here. Now we flip over to the back side. Pot codes can be very, very helpful in the late 60s, early 70s to date guitars. Unfortunately, we don't have those. This has been completely rewired. Looks to me like 500K CTS pots. We've got the ground wire, looks like 50s style wiring to me. But we can at least see the original markings right here that you would find from the factory. Now, I'm not the best at looking at the control cavity to see when it's made. That's not my strong suit because I haven't really seen enough. But it does look like we can see some of the original finish here. And under Blacklight, that'll become very apparent. Now, as far as the jack plate cover, I'm guessing that's been replaced too. I mean, I know they do kind of look like that originally, but pretty much everything on this guitar has been replaced, so I don't have much confidence for all this other stuff. But strap buttons in your regular locations, and then I don't know what's going on with this toggle switch. I've never seen something like that. But the back plates are black on these. They say made in Japan, so obviously that's probably where our bridge came from, was a made in Japan type guitar, and so is that back plate. So my best guess is this was probably a husk at one point in time that somebody just pieced back together, or they took all the expensive parts off and sold it. But you've got some buckle worming back here, nothing that appears to go too far deep into the finish. Looks like some dings over here, so it was definitely played from the time that all these modifications were done. But it looks really clean, like a little bit too suspiciously clean. That's why I still think it had some sort of a respray or something. Let's take a minute to look around the side of the body. You can see that pancake body a bit better and the wide binding in the cutaway. So no more of that historic spec stuff with the thin binding. And we'll follow it along the side. Looks like you got a couple of deeper impressions on this side. So now we got the neck. It's 3 pieces of mahogany, so that's a undesirable spec of a 1969 as compared to a 68. So they just layer the mahogany up like this. Generally, you don't have issues with like actual separations. Like sometimes you can feel a slight line. However, it got broken here. Definitely caused some trauma right there. So it seems very likely that at least the neck had to have been oversprayed or something, because you can feel a slight line. But I don't think it's going to be anything that's like, I don't like playing this guitar because of that. But you stop feeling that about right here, I would say, which lines up with about your 5th fret. And when he told me this thing had a headstock repair and didn't show me any photos, I just always assume the worst. This, honestly, I wouldn't even care about this myself. I mean, you can still feel a slight gap right here, but it was only one portion of the mahogany neck that broke. So this laminated neck actually ended up saving it. And there is a very tiny little bump volute right here. You would miss it if you didn't know you were looking for one. So that's another little spec that also helps us date this one to 1969. But it looks like they went as far as like sinking a little dowel into the headstock. So my guess is what that does is it goes through to here and kind of like, Lincoln log connects it, glues that all together. So that's secure in that way, as well as how it's glued there. So it wasn't a complete break, so I have no fears. I mean, this thing came to me from Canada, shipped by USPS, and that's the true test of a headstock repaired guitar. If it'll survive shipping, it's going to survive pretty much anything you throw at it. That is a good lighting spot to see the small bump volute. So now onto these tuners. The bodies, I mean, they look like they have a chance they could be original. They look decrepitly old, right? But the tips, 100% replaced. Those are modern parts. Here's what the back side of the tuners look like. I don't see the normal patent numbers that you would normally see in this era, but honestly, I'm not an expert on Klusons. I know just enough to get me by, but that's what that looks like. So I took that tuner off to show you what happens when you put Grovers on instead of Klusons. Thankfully, generally speaking, the Grover imprint will be pretty well hidden by the Klusons when they're put back on. However, taking it off, if they were installed correctly, the securing hole will fall a little bit lower than the Kluson one. You can see somebody doweled that hole correctly and then drilled a new one, so that tells us it was a professional installation of these new ones. But the Grovers have a larger shaft, so you actually have to ream the headstock out. And then in order to install these clusants back on, you have to use a conversion bushing, which is currently in this, to tighten that fit back up. So definitely have been Grovered, and Grovers ruin the value of these collectible instruments. But for a player's model, you might just decide to go back to those if you don't like these things. But our serial number appears to be 891045, which also puts us within the date range of a late series 1969, according to the 60s Les Paul website. So yeah, that was fun. I always enjoy getting a mystery guitar, and I'm glad I ended up taking it on consignment to help him find out truly what it was, because he only had so many photos to send me, and this turned out to be quite a valuable piece. So I thought for sure this was going to be like a 73 Deluxe headstock repair, refinish, maybe get $2,000 for him, but I think we're definitely going to be on my higher end of the estimates. But let's check it out under Blacklight real quick. I want to be clear that just because something glows does not mean it's the original finish. It just means it's an older finish, and sometimes brand new finishes also glow. But here's what kind of makes me start to think overspray, is because underneath here you can still see, a significant different color, and that would happen if a pickguard was over top of that area for some time. The knobs, yeah, no doubt about it, those things are vintage. The headstock, we could be able to see if it snapped the holly veneer or anything, but no, nothing like that. But you can see some touch-ups on the edge of the instrument, so that tells us this guy was not afraid to touch up some spots. And you get a little bit of an anomaly right there with the lacquer. Not really quite sure how to explain those ones. I mean, a rubbed finish, maybe something was on top of it, part of the overspray process. There you can kind of see that ring around the tuner. Here's what started to make me think that it's been oversprayed. Look at the lacquer inside of the guitar, how much more vibrantly that glows. Now, remember, it's underneath a cover. It will glow differently than the body's finish because it hasn't been exposed to as much UV light. But that finish looks different as compared to what we're seeing here. So that's something else that kind of makes me go, Then we move over to our neck here. I mean, there's no way that this hasn't had something done to it because of the repair. I mean, you can see it's got new lacquer along it, even in these areas. But looking at the back of the headstock, that's what everything's looking like. I mean, at the top you can see a whole bunch of lacquer touch-ups and whatnot. But thankfully, it doesn't look like our pancake body's separating or anything. That's actually a lot rarer than people want you to believe. Meaning these don't separate very often unless they have been abused. The Blacklight segment got me curious, so I decided to actually take a look at the top of the headstock. So I think what broke this guitar was a large impact right here, because there's actually an additional crack right here along the edge of the headstock. It might have even extended all the way down to there. So when I was saying that we saw this dowel right there, I don't think it actually goes diagonal like I thought. I think it runs up through the headstock and might even come out to right here. It almost looks like some sort of a rosin material or something in there. I don't understand why they would do that though, unless they were using that to anchor this. I don't get it. But it's got some sort of a repaired crack here. And that weird headstock tip actually looks like it was recrafted out of that same rosin material. You can really see that right there. So they got crafty when repairing this. I feel it's also worth noting that there are some gouges on the side of the neck here. You can feel it while you play. I don't think it's too obtrusive, but there's definitely wear and tear up and along the side. Also looks like there was a small crack off the nut right here on the treble side of the instrument. And here's another good indication of an overspray. See all those black dots? That's underneath the finish. But I think we already knew this area would have some sort of an overspray. But since the glow of this matches almost everything else, I mean, they probably just went for the full-on refinish. This must have had like a top that was not looking so good at that point. I mean, there's no way a gigged instrument would look still like this. Now, granted, this is a reissue ES295, but this is really trying to capture that original gold top finish. I guess in this case, all gold, that the gold tops would have. But then you swap over to this one, you see how it's more of like a yellowish green? That's what's making me think it might not be the exact same color. But then again, gold tops have changed hues. so many times. It's kind of hard to tell, but it just doesn't quite look right to me. All put back together, it doesn't look too half bad. Now, there is a little bit of a color difference between your pickguard and your pickups. Just want to let you know, but let's go ahead and grab the weight, which honestly, it doesn't feel too bad. How much? 9 pounds, 10.5 ounces? That's a lot heavier than I would have guessed. It feels light, but I guess there is some heft to the body. So now that we know what it is, let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how it sounds as a player's grade vintage model. All right, let's go ahead and grab the tones of the Seymour Duncan Antiquity pickups in a 1969 gold top body. I'd say that sounds pretty good. I especially like the neck pickup out of the Antiquity set, so it blends well with the middle pickup too. Go ahead and kick on some distortion, see if that bridge pickup comes to life. Now that we know all about this 1969 Les Paul Gold Top, what are my final thoughts on this thing? There's a lot of lore and stories behind the late 60s Les Pauls, and I think this is the first one I've had that's, not a reissue of some sort. And I've got to say, despite this one, not having the original parts pretty much everywhere, you can tell there's a certain characteristic to this guitar that's just a whole lot of fun to play. Even though this one might not have the most desirable specs out of all the 60s Les Pauls, it was still a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. The headstock repair, absolutely nothing to worry about on this one. I didn't notice any bad tuning stability or anything like that. And it feels good. It still has that old feel to it, but you can tell there's something that happened to this. I don't know the full story of this one, but looking on the workbench at all of its specs, obviously pretty much everything has been changed on this except for some tone plastics. But anyways, I hope you troglodytes enjoyed checking this guitar out. If you're interested in being the next owner, it is on my shop, on my website. It's on consignment. You can also find it on Reverb, listed at a higher price. It's just Reverb fees. That's the name of the game. All right, troglodytes, thank you for tuning in today. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will catch you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care. As always, if you're interested in being the next owner of one of these demo guitars, you can check them out on my website, troglysguitarshow.com. There's some links in the description.